So I think everybody knows, and we've touched on it, we're just a few days, a week past a conflict between Israel and PIJ. We have the judicial reform issues. We have May 29th budget. And what's so crazy is we could do this 2 weeks from now, we'd have 3 different issues. And it's just, there's always something remarkably timely. But we're really fortunate. Susie's going to chair a nice discussion here about what it means to be secure, Jewish, and democratic. So, Susie, if you come back up here. Glad to have our honoree still working, still on the clock. We also have our Glazer Foundation Director of Policy Research, Shira Efron, which I can't really see because of the lights, but Shira, come on up here. Nimrod Novik, who we just saw on the video, is going to come up here. And also our Chief Policy Officer, Michael Koplow. So we're delighted to have you all. Thank you, and I'll turn it over and step out of the way.
Welcome, Nimrod and Shira.
Hi, Susie.
Michael, but you guys flew a little further than Michael. So thank you for being here. So in the brief time we have tonight, I want to ask each of you a bit about the situation on the ground, about the current political environment in Israel, and about the wider regional picture. Nimrod, I want to start with you on the latest Gaza escalation. This round of conflict seemed like all the others before it, and it ended with the sense the next round is likely coming soon. Is that your assessment, and if so, how do you see this cycle being broken?
There's so much I want to say about you, but I'm not allowed. And the time is brief. Gaza. The most important thing about the last round is that it was the number 17 since 2004. Let that sink in for a minute. 17 rounds, and as you said, the last one was similar to the previous. Well, each one was different, but they were all the same. The last 3 rounds were triggered by Jerusalem. The previous ones were not. The last 2 rounds, the one before the one of last week, created a multi-front firing at Israel. You all remember 2021, 4 fronts, including domestic Israeli Arabs and Israeli Jews clashing in mixed cities, as well as West Bank, Gaza, refugee camps in Lebanon, and more. Every round seems to have its own characteristic, but they all end the same way. They resolve nothing. The same problems again and again. So once we fight with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, once Hamas stays out of it, and it looks easier and less bloody, and you don't know what the next one is, and God help us all that the next one is not tomorrow and Friday, given the anticipated mega provocation of what we should be celebrating, which is the Jerusalem Day, but is being used by our extremist lunatics in order to provoke clashes with Palestinians. Israel is stuck.
Can we get the lights on the stage back on somehow? Is that possible? So we can see Nimrod. Okay, tamshich.
My last sentence. Israel is stuck in a mindset that is a dichotomy, that is either more of the same, and after round 17 there will come 18, 19, and 20, or what we call in Hebrew zbenk vegamarnu, one blow and we'll get rid of Hamas and get rid of Islamic Jihad, and anybody who knows anything about Gaza, and certainly the Israeli defense establishment, know that once you try to get rid of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other militants in Gaza, you're stuck for decades with no exit strategy. the cost is going to be in human lives, Israelis and Palestinians, tremendous, and there's no way to get out of it. So between these two options of more of the same or this elusive zbenk vegamarno, there is very little will to consider the third alternative, which has been advocated by important groups in Israel. They are part of the IPF agenda, even though they are not on the front burner, and that is empowering the Palestinian Authority, a process of empowering the Palestinian Authority to the point where, with the help of a regional coalition of Abraham Accord signatories and others, we can start a gradual process of bringing the PA back to Gaza.
Shira, do you have anything you'd like to add? You know a thing or two about Gaza.
First, I always have something to add, so I'll take this opportunity, but I'm going to be less disciplined than Nimrod. I can't really top what everybody said about you. I do think that most people here don't know, though, that you embody this really unique combination of being, a leader from the top on one hand, but just the most down-to-earth person I've ever met. So grounded, there's a lay leadership on one side, but to me, you were just the most dedicated, hardworking, smart, compassionate, and kind colleague. And I thank you for that. And I know this is just not a goodbye, because tomorrow you'll be back at work. So I look forward to the next discussion tomorrow. So on Gaza, I agree with Nimrod. I just do think that there's something about not this round that was different, but the last 3 rounds. And yeah, this can change very easily. It might change tomorrow morning, but Hamas has stayed out. And I think part of it is Hamas's calculations reflecting on something that Israel has actually changed its policy on Gaza, having a civilian policy that's much more leaning, with workers coming out, working in Israel, many more exports that are not limited from Gaza, but also many more imports, including dual-use items. And it does affect Hamas's calculations to stay out. And by this, Israel is doing 2 important things. First of all, it is improving at the margins slightly the humanitarian situation in Gaza, which is a positive thing, but it also potentially makes these rounds shorter, less dangerous. And if we can do this for a long time, maybe we'll have some space and distance between these conflicts to create the space for the long-term process that Nimrod is speaking about, which this is really the only solution, but we have to create the conditions for it, and the conditions for it are not there at the moment.
Shira, you've begun to work with Palestinian colleagues researching how to rebuild Palestinian institutions. Where does the PA fit into this moment? Is the PA still relevant at all, and can it be strengthened?
So I just have to give a shout out to IPF for being very bold about this. We do have a research project, how to strengthen Palestinian institutions. It is with a Palestinian partner, but it's the Palestinian think tank in Ramallah, Horizon Center, but it's all Palestinians writing their own plan. We are partners in the sense that we are supporting this, but it's their work. The PA had not been involved in this Gaza operation at all. We've seen Mahmoud Abbas gave a speech afterwards as if it's checked out, it's if it's not of their business. But there's no other game in town when we're talking about a possible pathway for a 2-state solution for an entity that would live side by side peacefully by Israel, right? It's the Palestinian Authority. And strengthening the Palestinian Authority is something that we have to do. Unfortunately, I think that when we say strengthening the Palestinian Authority, we mean different things. And strengthening the Palestinian Authority until now has been mostly focused on strengthening the personas at the top. It's the same personas for many, many, many years. And this is not, it hasn't been helpful and hasn't dignified the Palestinians with the leadership that they deserve, let alone, a trustful neighbor for Israel. We need to strengthen the Palestinians economically, on their security front, and the governance piece. I just want to give an anecdote because we say it's not just about the money. It's not just about the money, but it's really teetering on the brink. I have just heard from Israeli defense officials that Palestinian security forces that are supported by the international community, when they go on an operational activity, they calculate how much gas they have, because the fuel suppliers are not stopped providing gas for PA vehicles because of their debt. So, we're talking about this. When you have PA personnel having to go to work in Israel, it weakens the very fabrics of those civil servants that's supposed to provide. Wendy Sherman spoke about the Sharem process, the Aqaba process. This is a process that we have something that if we put actual content, resources, commitment, determination, everything we don't have from the outside, by Israel, by the PA itself, and by the international community, you can start building those institutions back. And it will need courage on all sides, and it would probably call for elections, democracy, and paving the way for for political participation by younger Palestinians.
Michael, Acharon Haviv. The Israeli budget must be passed by May 29 or the government will fall automatically. Meanwhile, the judicial overhaul legislation has not officially gone away. What are you watching over the coming days and weeks in Israeli politics?
So first of all, I'm going to follow Shira and her lack of discipline briefly and just say I know of no other board chair or lay leader who could be sitting up here moderating a panel and could just as easily be a panelist and speak on all of these topics with knowledge and expertise. And I also want to say that it may not be evident to people in the room from sitting here tonight and watching these videos, but everybody on IPF staff adores you, Susie. We would all run through a brick wall for you. And thank you so much for everything you've done for us over the past 7 years. So I think there are a number of things to watch right now in the Israeli political process leading up to the budget, which, as you noted, has to be passed by May 29th, or else the government automatically falls and we go to new Knesset elections. I don't think there's any chance that that actually happens. I think the budget is going to pass. But what we're seeing now is a struggle between parties in the coalition over a number of things. There is a struggle that I think we're used to observing over years between the Haredi parties and everybody else, where even though the preliminary budget bill has passed out of committee, the Haredi parties are still looking for more budgets for Haredi priorities, from yeshivot to different food subsidies to other sorts of programs. And they realize that this is the opportunity to do it before the budget passes, and they are holding out the threat of leaving the government. I don't think it's a credible threat, but we are seeing them try to get more money, particularly given that the issue of the military draft law may not be resolved and probably won't be resolved before the budget has to pass. And since that's been their big North Star, they are now looking to make up for that in other ways. The other thing we're starting to see over the last couple of days is a split actually within Likud, and this is over something that was kind of slipped into the budget. I don't think many people were paying attention, having to do with municipal taxes. In short, there is a plan that's in this new budget to take municipal taxes that are paid by large municipalities that they charge to commercial tenants for building commercial space, and giving it to smaller municipalities who don't build commercial space but build residential housing. Doesn't sound like something that should be controversial, but because many of these large municipalities have Likud mayors, it has now become something within the coalition where Likud mayors are protesting and saying that this for them is a huge issue. They don't want money taken from their cities to go to smaller cities. And in fact, the mayor of Modi'in, who's a very popular and prominent Likud mayor, is the person who's sort of leading this charge against the government's budget with this clause. And so we're seeing churn in the coalition. As I said, I still think the budget's going to pass, but we are seeing these things play out in real time. And when this process is over, we're going to go back to judicial overhaul. I don't think it's going to I don't think we're going to have a quick decision about whether it passes or whether it's dropped. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to kick the can down the road and play for time. But this issue is not going away. And not only is it not going away in this government, it's not going away in future governments. This is now an issue that is here to stay. And until there is some fundamental deal between the different sides of the Israeli political spectrum, then we're going to be talking about judicial overhaul and related issues, I worry, years into the future.
I can't wait. Nimrod and Shira, do you have something to add to what Michael just said?
Yeah, I was the only friar, so I'm gonna now. There's nothing worse for an Israeli than being a friar. So I just tell the following story that I heard from Shimon Peres. Two men were walking in the street behind a certain lady, and one of them tells the other, "Look how impressive she is." And the other one responds and says, "How do you know? We only see her back." So the answer is, because I'm looking at the faces of the men who are coming across. That's what I felt when I looked at senators and congressmen and Israeli leaders and Palestinian leaders when they were talking to Susie. I was looking at their faces, and I knew that they knew that they were talking to a leader. And now to budget reform. I just want to add one thing to what Michael said, which I agree with completely. It is not just Likud municipal leaders that find it problematic, but it is the protest movement. And in Israel now you have three forces: opposition, coalition, and protest movement. And the tension between the protest movement and the opposition are very real. They don't trust them that when they meet at Bougie's home, they will not sell them out. On this issue, the criteria have been set in such a way that the money that is taken from the stronger communities to the weaker ones will not go to the weakest, which is the Arab sector. And strong communities in the West Bank are exempted from yielding to weaker ones. So this is not chalukah, what do you call it? Justice? Redistributive justice. It is not. It is politically distorted way of compensating certain communities in the same way as with the budget for the fact that the Prime Minister failed to deliver for them on the legislation. So before they jump ship, he has to give each one of them something from the budget in order to keep them within the coalition.
Shira?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and we have to remember this is just not the only thing. There are over 150 bills and draft of bills. Each and every one of them separately is terrible and would undermine Israel's. I'm not talking about just, Jewishness and secure and democratic values, but really the resilience, social cohesion, economic viability, future generations, my kids' ability to study normal schools, right? So this comes at in a context that's just scary overall. Lots to look forward to.
Michael, back to you. Could you comment on the mood in Washington today? How has this government made an impact on the discussions on Capitol Hill about U.S. Israel relations?
I think we've seen the way in which the U.S. government, from the administration to members of Congress, and it includes Democrats and Republicans, have looked at the judicial overhaul and find it worrisome. They find it worrisome, I think, on two counts. One, of course, is this issue of shared values between the United States and Israel. The same way that many American Jewish leaders and American Jewish institutions have found the proposed overhaul to be challenging to those values. I think that politicians in D.C. have found the same. And there is a real sense, we talk about shared interests and shared values. What makes the U.S. Israel relationship special is the shared values. If it was just a relationship of shared interests, it would look very much like relationships that the United States has with other countries in the region. And I think that there is an overwhelming sense in the administration and among members of Congress that they want to keep that special relationship, and that means safeguarding the values that undergird it. The other way in which I think it's impacting things is similar to what we're seeing in the region, which is a sense that Israeli stability is being impacted, and a sense that Israel, which has always been this staunch military ally, reliable in every single way, a safeguard of U.S. interests, a strong economy, all of the reasons why states in the region want to normalize relations with Israel, that is being challenged. And I think we're seeing that play out in some ways among Israel's relationships in the region, but we're also seeing it play out in U.S. Israel relations in Washington. And so, I think this is going to remain a concern. And what we aren't seeing as much, but I do fear is going to come back in the next year or so, is the general tension between the U.S. and Israel over Israeli policy in the West Bank. In some ways, judicial overhaul has crowded that out, but those challenges are coming. And I'll take this opportunity to promote a new report that Israel Policy Forum is putting out that we are almost entirely complete with, that looks at the history of U.S. policy toward Israeli settlements across every administration from LBJ on to the current Biden administration, looks at the various ways in which the United States has dealt with the challenge of settlements over time, kind of the basket of options that are available, and proposes a number of changes to how we think that the U.S. should be dealing with it. And these issues are going to keep on coming up, particularly once the budget passes. I should briefly mention here that, since we're talking about the budget, to pick up on something Nimrod said, it is almost certain that some of the funds going from larger municipalities inside of Israel will end up going to settlement construction in the West Bank. In this budget, there's a 5-year master transportation plan. 25% of the funds are dedicated for the West Bank. To give people a sense of what that means, that's about a quarter of the entire transportation budget of the state of Israel for 5 years, going to benefit about 5% of Israeli citizens. So this is going to keep on coming up. It's going to cause tensions with the United States. And I think that, unfortunately, we're probably going to see more of that over the next year.
Shira, you've been working to find ways to build on the Abraham Accords. Of course, you co-authored The New Normal, IPF study on leveraging normalization to impact the Israeli-Palestinian arena. How do you assess the Abraham Accords today, almost 3 years since their signing? And has this Israeli government and the current political turmoil in Israel truly impacted the regional picture? Finally, how has the Saudi-Iran rapprochement impacted the prospects for Saudi-Israel normalization?
Okay, so it's a big question. I think the answer to the first one, sort of the state of the Abraham Accords now, it's a consensus that the Abraham Accords now are in decline. We hear this across the board, slightly disappointment from partners. Heard this from Bahrain, also the Emirates, of failing to see the benefits of the accords. We are seeing cancellations of formal meetings. The Prime Minister himself is not being invited to any of the countries, even though there are attempts to get an invite. But also other things. The Negev Forum, which was established as part of the Abraham Accords, there was supposed to be a ministerial meeting in Morocco and was indefinitely postponed. There were other meetings that were supposed to happen and have not occurred. Even track 2 and track 1.5 are being canceled. So this is where we are at the moment. And on the other hand, we are hearing those developments, those reports that sound there's reason to believe it very genuine, of a potential opening in Saudi-Israeli ties. So there's sort of the old news, but could potentially be new things. I will say that there are a lot of developments in the region. There's been reconciliation basically between all parties. Turkey with each and every one of the other countries. Syria, Bashar Assad is going to be at COP28. This is sort of there's been rapprochement between all countries, and if you followed the signs between Iran and the Emirates and Saudi a few years back, we knew this was coming, despite and many people in the defense and intelligence circles in Israel, of course, knew this was coming. So it was just kind of funny political accusations that it was the responsibility of this or any other government in Israel. Israel had no part in this. It's not about Israel. I think this dichotomy that we create, it's either or, either Iran or Israel, either the U.S. or China. It's true for Israel. It's not true for the Gulf countries, and this is actually what we're seeing today. Personally, I just don't think de-escalation is a bad thing. Okay, so it could have positive things. We're yet to see if we can square this circle, or I don't know how many facets this shape has of making progress on the Israeli-Saudi peace. Giving this timing and what it would require from the United States, what it requires in Congress, what it would require from Israel, and of course from the Saudis themselves.
Nimrod, you have long-standing relations with many in the Arab world. Some of them are sort of back channels. Do you have anything briefly to add to what Shira is saying about the Abraham Accords and the Iran-Saudi rapprochement?
Yes, and I'd like to build on something that Michael mentioned at the end and how it linked. I mean, as though the domestic turmoil was not bad enough, it is affecting our standing in the region. For the regional players, from President Sadat in the 1970s until today, or until 5 months ago, Israel has three attributes of Israel played well in creating relationship and being attractive to regional players. One was, from Sadat on, Israel was perceived, and to a large extent was, the best advocate for an Arab party in Washington. The road to Washington goes through Jerusalem. And indeed, Israel was, I mean, I remember just before one of the 5 cycles of elections that we had, I was sitting with 2 Israeli colleagues at the office of the head of the Egyptian intelligence in Cairo, and he was not alone, and it's important. Some of his people were there. And he told me, you know that President Sisi votes for Bibi. And I asked him, what do you have against guns? And he said, no, it's not that we guns, but Bibi has been working for us in Washington. That was an asset. You look at Israel today, and when the president refuses to see Netanyahu because of what's going on at home, the Arab world looks at him, and Bibi is not an asset, it's a liability. So that's one. 2, Michael mentioned stability. And stability had 2 phases. Israel was a stable society, and suddenly 5 elections, oh boy, 5 elections.
Don't worry about it.
5 elections in a row cannot produce a durable government, so it doesn't look stable. And its coalition is loaded with arch extremists and provocateurs who threaten regional stability by whatever they have in mind for Jerusalem and the West Bank. So Israel is not stable and is not stabilizing. And the third one is security, military power, and the will to use it. You cannot expect Arabs in the region to see the effect of the reservist protest the way we see it. We know that within a minute of emergency, They will all be there and do their duty, no matter what they think of the current government. But in the Arab world, when they see these kind of protests, and when they see that the prime minister is under indictment and there is no government, and one day another government and another one, there is Israeli intelligence has identified indications that all hostiles, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, others, reach the conclusion that Israel has been weakened, and now it's the time to test how much we can challenge it. So when Hezbollah, for the first time ever, tries to detonate a device 60 kilometers inside Israel, it was Hezbollah taking a very unusual risk at the time that they are not prepared for a full-fledged confrontation. Each one, Iran was taking security steps against us that were not successful, but they were testing the envelope of challenging Israel. So on all three counts, Israel doesn't look good today, and nobody wants to go out in public with us. So the Abraham Accords countries, as Shira described, are taking wait-and-see situation. They don't want to meet in the Negev summit, and the morning after, Israel will embarrass them with some provocation on Temple Mount. So the region is now taking a step back and here is the link between the domestic turmoil and losing important assets in the region.
So I just want our audience to know that we could go on doing this for hours because this is like crack to us. This is what we do. But we are standing between you and dessert. So lightning round, in closing, I want to ask each of you if you could just share what you're currently focused on or watching in the consequential weeks, I should say days, because tomorrow is the flag march in Jerusalem. So starting with tomorrow, but the days, weeks, and months ahead, whether generally on your work at IPF, but al regel echad. Michael, I'll start with you.
So I'll say I am watching the evolution of the American-Jewish relationship with Israel. I think that over the past 4 months, we have seen deep changes that are also going to outlast this judicial overhaul crisis. I think that the way that American Jews and American Jewish institutions approach Israeli governments going forward is going to be different. And I think that while in some ways this has been challenging to American Jews, we're also seeing American Jews re-engage with Israel in a way that I haven't seen in years. So that's what I'll be watching.
Shira?
I think, try to be positive. I think I'm looking at sort of the low-hanging fruit where we can find small successes of cooperation between Israel, Palestinians in the region, and sort of in the Venn diagram of what this Israeli government can sort of stomach, the PA can do, the international community can be engaged in enough, and the region. And I think there's a lot on the environmental front, on water projects and solar energy. Gaza is now, is going to get a limited attention, focusing on there, on food security in the Palestinian arena. And, as IPF, we're doing more in that regard, but I think it will advance us toward our big goal of creating conducive conditions for getting out of this mess.
Nimrod?
When everybody was focused on the Abraham Accord because it was very sexy, or on the Palestinian arena because it was so troubling, there was a tendency to miss an in-between layer, which is Egypt and Jordan, which are neither here nor there. And they are far more important to Israel's security and well-being and their stability as an interest of Israel. And that did not get enough attention. And therefore, at IPF, we decided to create a platform for zeroing in on Egyptian and Jordanian perceptions and impact and how they are being affected by developments in the Israeli-Palestinian and broader regional context. We call it critical neighbors. And it features an Egyptian, Jordanian, Palestinian, and your humble servant Israeli perspectives on issues of the moment. And stay tuned, the next one is probably out. If comms can recuperate from this event, then it will be out next week.